Hey, it's Chris, Leisure Games. So, I don't know if you were taking notes, but I was. What do you need to know? Should you back Marvel Zombies? Marvel Zombicide, if you will. I've taken a look at the gameplay. I've read through the rule books. I've looked over the campaign page. What do you need to know? Is it right for you? Because you'll see, spoilers, it's not cheap. And unfortunately, I was right on the over. So let's take a look. Let's just go straight into it. Full disclaimer right at the beginning. I'm backing this right now, but I'm backing it so I can give the best insight as well. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to keep my pledge, but the elephant in the room was, what was the pledge total going to be? I thought at least the cores were going to be $90 each, and I thought Galactus was going to be somewhere between $150, $175. And that's kind of what it looks like, because you're dealing with a total pledge level right now of $410 if you want the Galactus model. And again, spoilers right at the beginning here, you cannot, as of right now, get the Galactus model by itself. You can only get, if you're one of those 11,000 people already backing, we'll take a look here, how many people are actually doing it. Only less than 50% are getting at the Galactus pledge, which is very interesting, which is both higher and lower than I thought, and we'll talk about that later. What are the other pledge levels looking like right now? Okay, so this is where a good portion of people are, and you have people just getting the core box as well. How attached to the X-Men side of things and how different is it? And then we'll talk about that in addition later in the video, because there are two different sets of rules already out for both the core when you were playing as the zombies, but then there is a different rule set, and there are some nuances between both of them that are slightly different that you really need to know about, and one may appeal much more to you depending on which side of things you fall. But there's interestingly not a just X-Men side of things either. And if you're looking at this, this is essentially, if we look at both the pledge levels here, $130 for the zombies, and then $110 for the X-Men. But then there is a $170 gap between that and the Galactus. So Galactus is $170 basically by himself, with the scenario and the Silver Surfer, at least just that for now, that we know of. And so that's the interesting point. Is it worth $170? And Cthulhu Death May Die had the other giant Cthulhu, which sort of had a scenario, but I don't think was as interactive. And we'll talk about that because they just released more information with one of the updates talking about the different aspects of the expansion in the first place. Now, and again, if you know anything about CMON, this $410 pledge level right now, I said the over-under was going to be something around 500. I am going to be probably way off on that as well, because you know that there are going to be expansions coming. There are even wordings in the rule books saying so, because of how they put things in there in the first place. And if you know anything with a CMON campaign, you can expect in the past anything along the lines of 7 or 8 gameplay and non-gameplay included expansions or additional content. And so if this is going $410 right now, I would wager a very that you're going to be lucky if this is under 600. This is probably going to be closer to like 650, between 650 and 700 for the all-in right now. And a lot of you are already probably going, you know, if I can't get the all-in, I don't want to get it. And you know what? That's fine. But with any Kickstarter pledge, anything, any GameFound pledge, the best value is always the core pledge. So your best value by far and away, and that's why a high proportion are at this one right now, and that's the Resistance pledge. The Resistance pledge is going to be your best money value regardless, period. So now we've got the preamble out of the way. What do you need to know? Let's go down through the game page right now, and then I will break down the rule book for the things that you need to know, the differences between this and the other Zombicides out there, because that's going to be the main question. And then also, what is the differences between the Avengers, where you were playing as the zombies, or, you know, the Marvel as you're playing as the zombies, because we're getting some crossover regardless. And what is the difference between when you're playing as the superheroes? And then what do I think of also the stretch goals? So we'll kind of format that, as we'll kind of use that as the format for this video. So if one particular section jumps out to you and you want to know more about that, the timestamp in the comments below will help you get there. So let's break this down. Okay, so like I said, it's going through the Marvel Universe. The interesting thing about this is Michael Chanel, who did Bloodborne, is also on this, which is, again, is making me very positive from that side of things, because it makes me think that this is going to be more than just the usual zombie side of things. But the Undead Pledge, this is your basic, you're as the zombies, you're fighting, you've got the grid-based system. There's going to be a couple nuances that are different. This is more grid-based, as opposed to, you know, hex-based or anything like that. It is also heavily more line of sight. So again, things that are already starting it a little bit off differently than some of the other Zombicides. Here's the Resistance Pledge. This gets you the compatibility to go along with playing as the heroes on the X-Men side of things as well. And so the difference here, and they even state it here, is accumulate power. So on one side of things, you're only going to have a certain amount of actions. On this side, you're going to have power, which is going to give you additional dice rolls, and we'll talk about that in a little while. It gives you sort of the X-Mansion right here. The other thing I have not seen yet, but I wonder with the stretch goals, you know, just as a off-the-cuff thought, is how much mappage are we going to get? Are there going to be additional maps that are going to be unlocked as stretch goals? I mean, we're all focused on the heroes, we're all focused on the villains, we're all focused on the zombie versions of all of them, because that's what they're doing as well. We'll get to that in a minute too. But are we going to see different mappages? How different is that going to be? And are they only going to be included in expansions? And that's my fear, is that they're not going to give us anything in stretch goal side of things, but they're going to give us only in expansions, which is going to necessitate sometimes the, you know, need for additional expansion, because as many heroes and villains as they're probably going to give us, some of that other core stuff sometimes doesn't actually fall in the core. It falls in some of the superfluous expansions that you kind of wish were more tied in with the base game in itself. And this is already, you can already tell with the stretch goals and with the fact that they have said flat out that they're going to do split shipping, with the first wave hopefully be coming in with the core of just this undead pledge, essentially, of October 2022, maybe just without the stretch goals, I think, actually, just the Marvel Zombies base game, that it is going to be, as with Marvel United, as they did with that, as they did with Spin Master, it's going to be retail focused as well. So again, just something to be aware of. When are you going to get the second wave? Well, I mean, this says June 2023. I would imagine a year later. I'm thinking you're lucky if you're getting it by October 2023 at that point. So then we see the Galactus pledge, and we talk about this here, and the big thing you need to know here is the living and the zombie interchangeability. You're either devouring Earth or devouring him, essentially, and we'll talk about the mechanics that they revealed in the update and whether or not those are worth it, whether or not you like those from that side of things, and what other surprises do you think that they're going to potentially throw, because that's the other aspect of this that is both scary and intriguing, is as they have done in previous games, they have pledge locked content in expansions, and I could see them pledge locking additional stuff to make this more enticing. I kind of hope so, and I kind of hope not at the same time, because again, like I said, I'm on the fence. So the Zombicide basics here have not changed. It is, and this is the big thing in the rulebook that it says, and we'll get to that in a couple minutes, you are cooperative, obviously. You are using an AI system, so it's not a one versus all. You are also playing essentially with anywhere from 1 to 6 players, but it recommends using 4 or 6 at all times. And if you use less, or if you use a different number, it doesn't scale. That's really the big point you need to know from that aspect. So if you want to play with just 2 or 3 heroes, they don't scale it. It just says, you know what, it's going to make it harder. And you just need to be aware. So I guess that will also be looked at as a positive. If you want a harder Zombicide game, this is going to allow you to do that, to play with less heroes, to see how and what happens when you choose to use less, and how that's done in general. Again, what do you need to know? Okay, the more powerful you become, the more powerful they become, the more skills you unlock, the more that, you know, they get more stuff as well. So it's a balancing act, if you will. Power begets power, a little power creep on both sides of things, if you will. It is also an interesting aspect, because this is, I don't believe this was in all of the iterations of the old Zombicides, but is coming about with some of the newer iterations, that they are really focusing on, if one person dies, if you lose one of the characters, if you're playing with 2 people, if you're playing with 4 people, if you're playing with 6 people, if you lose one, if one person dies, you lose. Everybody loses, mission over, game over, boom, fiend. So that's something you may or may not be aware of, or you may or may not like from that aspect of things. We talk about the zombie mode, and these are your basic retails. You've got everything that you saw in the trailer, no real surprises here. A little bit of surprise that Deadpool, I guess, is in the core. He's not really the core, but Spin Master apparently has the license, and they're using him, for everything that they can. Unique skills, and we'll talk about this in the rulebook for a second, and it's both a blessing and a curse. You can see as they go, you get stronger. And as you get stronger with experience by beating enemies, you move this tracker that goes up at the top of these boards that's not seen in this picture here. And as it goes up, you start out with just this blue ability. Then when you get the yellow, you get an extra action. So instead of 3 actions as a zombie, you get 4 actions as a zombie. And then you get into the orange, and you get the second ability. And then you get all the way to the end of this tracker, and you get this super ability, or this, leader ability in case of, zombie Captain America. Now, the problem I have with that right in the get-go is, if you actually look at the rulebook and you see it all the way, it is all the way on the very far right side, and the experience you need is 43 experience. That is a heck of a long game to be able to get to 43 experience. And so I fear, not having played it, not having gone to that aspect yet is how achievable is that actually going to be? How usable are those skills actually going to be in the first place? Is it even going to matter? Or is it just a skill on there to sort of taunt you, to tempt you to create a super long scenario so you actually get a chance to experience it? Because it doesn't seem like to me, at least on surface value, that it's going to be very easy to get from that aspect of things. Because the other thing that you need to know is that you are rolling dice every time, and one of the things that'll get blown up here in the rulebook in a second is you have to roll a certain number to be able to hit enemies. Enemies just hit you. They automatically hit you. They deal you a wound every time they hit you, and they can all attack at once. And so if you have 5 guys in your area, it's not like one guy attacks and then one guy attacks and then one guy attacks and one guy attacks and one guy attacks. No, it's when one triggers, they all trigger. So you can potentially be in a room or a situation with multiple guys that are all attacking you at once that do automatic damage depending on what your skills are and what your abilities to mitigate it are. And again, how does that concern you, or how does that intrigue you? Because it's potentially, and I say this potentially, going to lead to a slightly more strategic Zombicide-ish game that people have been clamoring for years now. But does rubber meet the road? Is that an actuality or not? And that's something you need to know. I feel mixed about it from this next aspect of the zombie traits, because essentially one of your actions on your turn that you're going to be doing is you're just going to be taking one, essentially. And that's not, I mean, it's okay. But that's it. Like, so on top of these other abilities that you have here in the colors, and I guess it's okay, but again, it's not very thematic. I mean, you know, the other thing with Marvel United was that they tried to at least give a little bit of powers, especially with the second one, that was thematic and make the deck somewhat incorporating. This is just kind of random. Like, you get like self-cannibalize or like super speed or something like that on like a zombie like Sabretooth or Juggernaut or someone that shouldn't have super speed in the first place, and it doesn't really make sense. The other aspect is bystanders, and bystanders are completely different in the modes that you're doing in this, and devouring them gives you the ability that they have, but devouring them is not easy, because devouring is a separate action altogether than the attack ability, and it's a separate roll, it's a separate potentially success, and you have to be in the same area as them. It's all melee, and so it's just a little bit different as opposed to in the X-Men game, where you basically just have to be in the same area and you rescue them. And they can be escorted by guards, they can just be trying to escape. It's very different from how it interacts with on the other. And it's just got some very interesting choices here, because again, as a positive and a negative, you have characters that I would think you could be utilizing as full-blown characters like they are in Marvel United, like Okoye. You could easily be doing it with Wong or Pepper Potts. They have Coulson here, Bob here, who are playable characters. I think Bob is, especially, and so is Coulson in Marvel United. And same thing with Marvel Legendary. They're both playable characters, so it's interesting to put them as bystanders. But they say some of the bystanders can actually be attackers as well that do damage. So again, how much of a dynamic is that going to be, and how well is it actually going to work is the question. The hunger. So every turn you're gaining a hunger, and you have to devour, or you return ravenous. And ravenous means all you can do is move and devour. Move and devour, move and devour. You are a thoughtless zombie at that point, and until you devour, then devouring automatically brings it down to 0, and there are ways to mitigate that, and the ways to mitigate damage with some of these abilities. Captain Marvel's energy absorption, for example, allows her to mitigate and avoid a damage by increasing her hunger. You know, things like that are going to allow you to mix and match, essentially. The dice are what they are, and I did not see anywhere in the rulebook that this is an exploder die, so there's no instance of that, which, again, I actually kind of like exploder die, so I'm a little disappointed. The shield agents. Shield agents and shield troopers, there are 4 levels of heroes that you're going to be going up against in the Marvel side of things. One of them are troopers, one of them are specialists, superheroes, and guards, as you can see all here. And one of the big aspects from the rule book that is very interesting and very slightly irritating at the same time, potentially from a gameplay standpoint, is that if you are in a situation, if you are in a zone with a hero, you automatically have to target in a certain order. You have to target heroes first. You have to then, I believe, target specialists or guards. I forget which it is. It's sort of an odd order. I think specialists are actually like last. I think troopers are somewhere in the middle and guards are somewhere in the middle. But it's an odd combination, especially as these lethal guys, the second strongest guys, essentially, you can't get them second. But the heroes are, I guess that makes sense thematically. They're going to be trying to, hero up and block things. But, sometimes if you're in a zone with one hero and like 4 troopers or agents, it would just be nice to be able to take out those guys and then deal with the hero alone. Because the other thing that you need to know is that damage does not carry over. So the toughness, as they say here, which is indicated by the upper right-hand corner of their cards of the life that they have, if you can't kill them, they go back to full health next turn. So if you have to target them first, you can't eliminate any of those other guys, which means the hero might not kill you, but all of those other guys activating as well as the hero, because you can only target the hero and you couldn't take out the hero on that turn, could kill you. And again, how do you feel about that? Again, it could be very divisive and interesting, but also frustrating. So again, no strange, excuse the pun there, no odd choices here. I mean, this is your basic Avengers. I mean, this is what it is. New York tiles. Again, I'd like to see some tiles. This token right here. They talk about this token using against enemies for strikes. There is a dismembered sentinel hand, which is the equivalent in the X-Men side of things. But they say very specifically, this is the part in the rulebook which tells me that they already have some element of this particular aspect in the expansions, that they mention that there will be other nuances of tokens, essentially, in other expansions. Now, let's talk about the rulebook. So I've talked a lot about several of the points that I already wanted to bring up. The fact that this is a single narrative, it is no campaign at this point. The upgrades and the abilities are sort of interchangeable, but also sort of not. The bystanders are a nice feature to give if you can devour them, but these zombie trait cards are kind of, you know, again, kind of weird how you're getting them. The hero mode content that they talk about, that they really flare up here, really to encourage people to get both, essentially. And I'll put this out there right now. I'm not a fan of them splitting the stretch goals. I think that's very disingenuous to split the stretch goals in terms of the heroes and the villains, or the heroes and the zombies side of things, as different stretch goals. Like, seriously, you're not going to give us one without the other. I mean, that's blowing smoke in my face. And I'm not opposed to like the pseudo fake stretch goals as a whole, but blowing smoke in my face and thinking that, okay, well, you know, Beast was just announced, or Luke Cage was just announced, and we're only going to have him for one and not the other. Come on, man. Come on. You know? So again, we talked about the co-op. We talked about the fact that if one person dies, then you all lose. It's a 4 to 6 player, but it says right here, any mission with less zombie heroes than the number listed, but note that this may drastically increase the difficulty of that mission. So again, just something you need to know from that. So here is essentially the game overview. Winning and losing, you do all of the mission objectives. It's a mission objective game. It's not like an eliminate. It's not like a smash. And we don't really have any indication on what some of those missions may be, although we know that Galactus is going to be different. And they basically go over, okay, players go, and then all the enemies go, and then it ends up at the end of the phase, whatever needs to be wrapped up from that. So what are we actually doing? So here you can see an example of the map that I was talking about. And this is a grid-based system, and you are moving between sections. You are not moving in a grid or a pattern, but you are also only moving orthogonally. It is a game with line of sight. So if you have line of sight, you can attack. If you have line of sight, you can, you know, target in that sense. So again, something you need to know as you're going across. There is also a different aspect that is, you know, somewhat hit or miss in the zombie side of things. It was in Invaders, I believe, and a couple of the others, where you have an open and a closed door system, where you do not have line of sight with those closed doors. Enemies may spawn after you open doors and reveal what is there. Again, how do you feel about that? What sort of mechanisms can be utilized? Because, and essentially the mechanism of closing doors in Invaders was sort of, again, I can blockade things by just closing a door, and then the zombies, or the heroes in this sense, are they smart enough to actually do that? And as far as I can tell, I'm not quite sure about that, because their mechanisms of action are relatively, they either move or they either attack, right? They talk about what the ID card here actually looks like. And this goes back to what I said is, again, how different are these characters going to be? This, for example, Captain Marvel has 5 health points. She's got her blue one, her yellow, which is the same for everybody, and then she's got her orange and her red. And then she has, again, her hunger over here, her little special attack, her melee attack right here, and then her devour, which are all, again, I think slightly different. But again, you can see the devour is not even a success. Devour is only a 50% hit, and that's not terribly good. So that makes me a little concerned, because again, based on, and this is the other aspect that you need to know, it's not whose turn it is, depending on how many guys spawn, it's who has the highest experience level. So if you have one guy in the orange and the rest are like low yellow or blue, and someone's like alpha gaming and doing that, well, it's going to spawn everybody in the orange section, not the yellow or blue. And also the other concern here is, look at the gap between the yellow and the orange. That's a huge gap. You're spawning 3 guys versus spawning 8 guys versus a 1 difference there, getting the ability. And here you go. You can see again, this is all the way. I don't know if you guys can read this. You probably can't, but this spot over here, like I said earlier, this is 43 experience. You need 43 experience to get this skill down here. And most enemies only give you 1 experience, except if they're heroes, and then they give you how many ever toughness they are. So if let's say you take out 2 heroes and they have a total of 9 toughness, you would need to kill 34 other potential enemies in order to get that. And if I'm killing 34 enemies, is everyone else killing the same amount? That's a lot of guys spawning in the first place, and that either tells me it's going to be a super long game, or how achievable actually is this in the first place. And it doesn't make me very positive on that side of things, because there are a lot of cool abilities, I'm betting, unlocked down here that you may never get to utilize. And what's the point of having them if you can't utilize them? Again, here you go. Oh, I'm sorry. The guard has 2 experience as well. So, I mean, again, you're still maybe killing 28 instead of 34. Interesting enough, but again, is it? Player phase, you increase your hunger track, you refresh your activation tokens, so you'll have tokens that are going to be flipping back and forth, and then everybody goes. And they all get 3 actions in the blue zone. Like I said, you get your 4th action when you get experience level up into the yellow zone. Again, the actions that you can take is you move, you open the door, you gain a trait, or you are attacking. They also say that a lot of them are unique and they're discarded after a single use. So that's kind of weird as well. It doesn't stay with you. I guess makes kind of sense thematically, kind of frustrating at the same time. So again, on the enemy side of things, they basically are mindless zombies as humans. They're either attacking if they're in the same zone as you, and again, does not roll any dice, just automatically inflicts a wound. Even if you're super powerful, even if you're all the way experienced, they're just going to deal you a wound automatically. Enemies fight together, so again, this is that joining in, ganging up, all activating at one side of things that I was mentioning. Enemies that did not attack because they're too far away or there's no zombies around, they spend their action to move one zone towards the enemies. So, and they will actually, it says here, flank you essentially. So if there's a group and it's equidistant, one half's going to go around one side, one half's going to go on the other side. And they show you on the map. Again, we talk about the specialists. We talk about how you're spawning enemies and which level you spawn them at. We talked about all of that, the extra activation, and you're going to be drawing cards here as well that are not just your usual spawns, where Rush, where they activate right away, extra activate, activates all the guys of one type, bystanders we talked about, special actions. So there's a lot of things going against you in that draw side of things with the phase, which really could just make you SOL, which again, how do you feel about that? All of a sudden, you know, you were strategizing that these guys are away and now they all get an extra activation. Again, that's an instant KO potentially, and all it takes is 1. Spawning in buildings, we'll skip over that. Combat, we talked about most of the combat. And again, you're rolling dice. You're just rolling the dice that are indicated here. So 3 dice and you have to get 4+, and it does 0 to 1 range. And you can spread it out however you want, but you know, if you roll all 1s, 2s, and 3s there's nothing you can do. Now, again, I'm hoping that some of those traits, some of those abilities, say for Captain Marvel in this situation, are going to allow you to mitigate some of those dice. But especially if the attack is only from range 1, that's not a very far range attack, and you are very susceptible to counterattack if you miss. So that's going to be very, very interesting in terms of the balance mechanic when it comes to that. And that's one of the big aspects that's different on the X-Men side of things. Spoilers here. The X-Men side of things, you have power, as I mentioned earlier, and the power gives you extra dice to roll. So again, something kind of cool from the X-Men and the hero side of things that we're not seeing on the zombies, that you're also dealing with on the Devourer side of things here, as, you know, a way to have to keep yourself in control, because no matter what, your hunger is going up 1 level, and you're going to have to deal with it. And you're going to have to deal with it eventually. So you're going to have to do this 0 range, 1 die attack that's a 50-50 chance of getting it. And you could waste your whole turn trying to devour someone in the same space. And then, again, be very frustrated by the lack of actual gameplay because you can't devour a simple bystander that's sitting there unprotected. And now you're going to get an onslaught of shield agents because you rolled poorly 3 times. Is that going to be the case or not? Again, it goes and it reduces your hunger all the way down to 0. Bystanders can only be devoured. So if you ever want to get a bystander, that's what you have to do. Now you can devour other people, but you know, it's not as powerful as your regular attack, so you might be better off eliminating them, you know, again, as a better chance of doing so in the first place. We talked about the hunger, we talked about ravenous, we talked about activating the bystanders and the fact that they've got combat, non-combat, escorted. Here's the interaction of the objects, and let me see if I can find this text right here. Here we go. Interactive object, the Fallen Avengers sign, but the expansions might feature others. So clearly they're foreshadowing and, you know, giving us some hints on what to expect and how some of the expansions might differ. But again, expansions better differ than more than a couple different hero or villain skins or zombie skins and a token or 2. So, you know, that's not very enlightening from that. But that's it. That's the rule book for the main core. Now, let's go down to X-Men. What do you need to know about X-Men? Again, kind of the who's who of what you would expect. I mean, Mystique is probably the only one I wouldn't have expected of the classic And then they kind of went with an interesting choice. Again, Abigail Brand, Senator Kelly. Senator Kelly? Like, X-Men aren't protecting Senator Kelly. I mean, they kind of are, but Senator Kelly has always been sort of on the opposite side. Same thing with Stryker. Same thing with Boulevard Trask. And so those are kind of odd choices to me. It's kind of like they just said, hey, we have them and let's include them. Okay. This is the main difference, the power, and you're gaining power every turn, and you can get additional power, up to 4 additional power on any turn to get additional dice that you are rolling on your attacks, and the boards are relatively the same. The blue, the yellow, the orange, and then the red, and it unlocks the abilities that you have here, and the health, and the ability to have a bystander supporting you, as well as 2 different traits. So the general gist of things is the same. Now, again, the differences are on the other side. The zombies, okay, well, you have the walkers, which is multiple man, the reavers, and the hellfire guys. So again, classic villains right there from the X-Men, and so not surprising, but interesting choice then as well. Zombie heroes, I like these choices. Interesting that they put a couple of these on the other side. Dark Phoenix. Again, this is probably the most interesting cast of characters on any of the characters from this page. Dark Phoenix, Sabretooth, Psylocke, Iceman, Cyclops, and Juggernaut. So that's actually really, really cool. And I would love to play with those zombies in the other game. And that's maybe why, again, I'm probably going to get at least the Resistance Pledge, because all of these guys are my mainstays. I love the X-Men more than I love the Avengers. 3 double-sided tiles here. Again, not very much. And so that's what it makes me think that there's going to be something else along those lines, which again makes me very, more money. Now, here's the rule book before we get to Galactus. So let's go over this really quickly. This is a much shorter rule book. It has a lot of the same overhead, a lot of the same explanations and actions and toughness and all of that stuff that you would expect from the previous rulebook. So there's not as much to go over. The traits are very similar. Opening and closing doors, moving is all very similar. Interacting with the objects. The bystander, though, is one of the different aspects here. You can discard your bystander to prevent a wound, but this should not be done lightly, as it says, because if it triggers the bystander loss, essentially what bystander devoured, if that either happens as they get devoured and you're not protecting them, or if you lose your bystander, what happens is everybody loses a power, as well as everybody has to lose one of their heroic traits. So that's not insignificant, because that's less dice to roll, that's less power in the first place. This is the other big thing. Heroes automatically gain a power at the beginning of each round. They can also perform a power-up action to increase their power track by 2. So you can spend those dice, but you cannot have more than 4 additional power at any turn. So it's going to incentivize you to spend it and spend it often. But it's just additional dice. And the skills and the traits are going to require you to spend it in the first place as well. So those already are 2 big differences, and that's why you would potentially be looking at this, not just the characters that you would like to see crossed over. The bystanders, again, are slightly different. They talk about how the power track and what they're going to be using here in terms of spending, like I just said. And you have to, choose to do it before you do an attack, and you can't do it afterwards. We talked about the bystander loss. Here's the interactive object thing again. Expansions might feature others. So they're including it in both, so it's definitely happening. No doubt about it whatsoever. The dismembered sentinel plasma hand right here, and we talked about that, and that's about it. Again, this is a short rule book. Again, the targeting list down here, so you have to target in a certain order. You have to target the zombie hero, the brute, then the walker, then the runner. So you can't target necessarily the way you want. And again, on this as well as the core game, how is that going to make you feel? Because again, you're going to have to be a little bit more strategic, or you're just going to get a little more frustrated. Now we get over to Galactus. Galactus, interchangeable head, interchangeable right arm, 22 character pieces, 74 cards, and we'll talk about that in a second, because the cards are going to come into what the gameplay aspects are. The planet killer, or the living version of bringing down the giant. He's just basically destroying the planet as he destroys the map here, and we'll talk about that because they posted an update, and he's basically like walking over the map and destroying the tiles, and you have to choose how and what parts of his body that you're going to take down. And the same aspect of this is just how you're going to do it. So in this side of things as zombies, you have the ability to eat the Silver Surfer to gain cosmic power. On this side of things as the zombie, as fighting the zombie, you have access to Reed Richards' basically secret arsenal of forgotten, forbidden technology, and that's going to help you somehow take him down with superpowered weapons and things like that. Here you go. You can see a little bit of everything there. The zombie defense cards, what I just mentioned here, the action cards on both sides, and then the Ravenous and the Master Plan cards. So if it's not enough that he's just big and destroying everything just by walking on it, he's actually going to have a plan and actually going to have special things happening during each turn. I talked about the cosmic power and the fantastic lost tech, and the Silver Surfer, who is, I'll stop here for a second. Here, just give a special shout out. Silver Surfer is one of my favorite characters in all of the Marvel Universe, and I'm glad they're giving him his due diligence and his due everything, because he is literally one of the most powerful people. I mean, like, people don't always think of him like this, but he is on par with like almost Thanos. And to short him in a lot of the other games and a lot of their movies and a lot of the situations has just been sort of disheartening from my side of things. So the fact that he is really, as they say, offering a difficult option or a difficult threat to be able to be added in any scenario, whether it's zombie or regular, really kind of makes me proud from that side of things. And you can play as him, and allowing you to play either as the villain, the zombie, or the superhero, again, which again, I hope he's kind of cool. You can slam into him with the power of your cosmic board. Sorry, I just got to take a minute to talk about him because he is by far Norman Rad. Anyway, or potentially as, the zombie, you can channel the power of the World Eater as a zombie, giving him devastating devour effect in the game. That's pretty cool. So gosh, and this is what I said before the campaign, is I wished that this wasn't cool. I wish that the Silver Surfer was awful, and I wish that this was awful, and then I wouldn't be tempted by it at all, because I really don't like this. I really don't like the fact that it's so gaudy and it's so big and it's $170. Here you go, though. Here's the actual Galactus mission that I was talking about. Pseudo timer. If you don't bring him down, the map is destroyed. He basically just walks across the tabletop, literally speaking. Not literally, figuratively, literally. And so what you're going to be doing here is, okay, it's a 4x2. He's going to advance. He's going to destroy things. But there are twists based on the mission. And so that's, again, it's sort of a blessing and a curse, because I don't want to hear twists, because that actually makes me think about the fact that I would like to have this, because, again, it's offering a different twist, because you have these different parts of Galactus ranging from his legs, arms, head, whatever you may be, and depending on what you want to take out, how you want to take them out in terms of order is going to affect his actions, his abilities, and his focus in the first place. A key feature as well, order definitely matters, like they said. So if you want to not get grabbed and get eaten as a whole, take out the hand first. If you want to limit, how many actions he has, or take out his focus, take out his head first. His action deck that we talked about here that's going to be going on, and again, the master plan at the same time. So again, interestingly enough, on this part of things, that again, they're not offering it separately. You can't get one without the other. You're having to get it all. Now, will they change that before the end of the campaign? I don't know. Probably not. They tend to be rather inflexible, as opposed to other crowdfunding campaigns, which tend to be slightly more flexible from that. Again, because they want you to buy it, and so they're not going to offer it piecemeal for people that just want to get the huge miniature model. Again, I sort of see that as a loss, because you could potentially get a lot of people, probably, people that are just not wanting a board game in the first place, who just want to get this. And probably what's going to end up happening is you probably have people that will buy the all-in package, keep the gameplay content, and sell the model to people who just want the model. And CMON could be getting both of those if they were more flexible, I think. And so that's a little bit of a downside. Okay, my little section. Again, I'll talk about this just very briefly. Quackalope is the only one with videos. Will we see other videos? I don't know. But CMON has really streamlined it to give you one opinion and one viewpoint on their games lately, and it's been Quackalope. And again, nothing against him, but I mean, that's one opinion. And the blessing of a lot of the other crowdfunding nowadays is you get a variety of opinions. And again, even if a lot of them, as I will dare say, a lot of the time are positive and want to be positive and sort of sometimes are paid to be positive, they at least give you different nuances. Like, okay, I liked this aspect, I wasn't as big a fan of this aspect, or I liked this differently than the other person liked this more differently. And so again, which one is right for you, whether, however it lines up. And so the fact that it's really only one viewpoint, it sort of narrows things down. And so it's hard to get a good sense of, again, different strokes for different folks, but we can't, because there's only one stroke for everybody. Now we'll talk about stretch goals. They've gone with a daily bugle update as the stretch goals. And again, some of these are just, okay, great. You're giving us all the stuff that you said we were going to give at the beginning for all the ports. So, I mean, that's nothing. Now we start getting to the actual stretch goals here. And this is where I start to have a little bit of trouble as well. They're already spacing it out. And I like the fact that they did not space it out here too much. They gave us both loot cages at 2 million. But then we start getting it already as the second character stretch goal. They're already splitting the zombie and the hero. Come on. That's ridiculous. We're getting Winter Soldier next, and again, optional buys section. They've got the optional buys section all lined up. And I would guarantee that I would be shocked if there was less than $200 in optional buys at this point. So there you go. That is the breakdown of it so far. There is a wish list all over the place on Board Game Geek in terms of what characters people want to see. We're going to see where this goes and where this goes over the next 2 weeks. Because again, I think you're going to see a lot of expansions. I think you're going to hopefully see a lot of characters. But the other thing I worry about with this is, yeah, you started off hot. You started off with over $3 million in less than a day. What if these stretch goals stop? What if these stretch goals slow down? What if this is not as ravenous, to use their terms, in terms of funding? because otherwise we're going to run into, you know, another Trudvang, another Bloodborne, where things all of a sudden get way slowed down. Are they all of a sudden going to spring daily unlocks on us? You know, that's the biggest problem I have with this. And they're piecemealing it with the expansions, as Simon always does, to sort of give the boosts every so often that people are, oh, here's the $50 expansion, you know, 50% of the backers that are at this level are going to add, you know, $50. And so then all of a sudden we hit the next stretch goal, or all of a sudden we're going to go halvesies on it. But I just wish they'd be a little bit more transparent at the beginning here of saying, okay, these are our stretch goals and these are all the things we're offering. And, you know, the last stretch goal is going to be a box to put all this stuff in, as opposed to, you know, we'll just give it to you loose. Like, come on. Like, seriously, that's not going to happen. And so I just wish there was more transparency from that to give us a better sense of things, to give us a better idea of what was coming. And I know part of it is the surprise and the ride, and people like that. But at the same time, it'd be nice to have a little bit more clarity in terms of just not having as much of this stuff. Right? So there you go. The big question is, again, how different is this from Zombicide? And again, I think it is pretty different. I think it is different in the aspects of the hunger, especially on the zombie side of things, and with the additional dice rolling mechanics on the hero side of things, it definitely stands out. The bystanders add a new aspect of having to actually interact with them, potentially gaining or losing, more so when you're a hero rather than when you're a zombie. But the zombie side of things actually, I think, increases the difficulty. I would say the difficulty of this game is going to be considerably harder and deceptively difficult, just based on reading the devour rules, reading the hunger elevations, and not being able to get some of those powers very easily, like I said. And so this could be one of the harder, if not the hardest Zombicide out there, just from those aspects. Now, again, how thematically appropriate is it? How many other characters are we going to see? How stretched out are these stretch goals going to get? That's the big turnoff for me. You know, again, I don't care about the Galactus, but I just wish, again, the stretch goals, come on. The stretch goals are ridiculous. You're already at $500,000 on day one. What's going to happen? Like I just said, if all of a sudden the funding slows down to $100,000 a day, like, people are getting in on this because they expect with other CMON campaigns to get the 30 to 40 stretch goals. And so if you're getting $100,000 a day and your stretch goals are $500,000 apart, and you're only getting a stretch goal every 5 days, and that's only 3 stretch goals over the rest of the campaign, again, that's probably not going to be the case, but is it going to go all Trudvang? Those are the things that people are looking at and going and already anticipating. My pledge at this level is going to have this much value, not this much value that it's at currently. And like what happened with Trudvang is when people didn't get the expected value, sort of like what happened earlier last year with Pathfinder Arena, when there was an expectation that the value would increase over time, and so it would be worth it by the end, and that wasn't met. Then you saw people backing off and canceling, and you saw campaigns losing. And again, that's what happened in Trudvang, and they revamped things to do the daily unlocks. So I would not be surprised, although we're not seeing it right now, that we do see daily unlocks at some point in this campaign if things slow down. So what are my final thoughts? What am I doing? I'm keeping my pledge right now. The problem with this game, I think the biggest problem with this game right now is that, like I mentioned, with all of those rules changes from the regular Zombicide, it is not Marvel United. This is a definitely step up. This is with the line of sight, with the powers, with the managing of 2 or 3 different things. And it's no Euro game, you know? It's no Feld. But it's definitely a step up from the Marvel United, which means it's going to be a little bit harder to hit the table, which means it's not going to be quite as accessible. At the same time, it's going to, you know, open doors with the Marvel IP that other games, other non-Marvel games, even other Zombicide games won't. And so you're going to get some foot in the door just from that side of things. I don't have a Zombicide game, so I have no fanboyism. I have no urge to get this. And so I could utilize a game like this, because it is going to be slightly easier to get to the table than, say, something like Bloodborne, like I mentioned earlier, something like The Others, or something along those lines, where there are a lot more rules of engagement. There are a lot more overhead in terms of, you know, remembering or line of sighting or, you know, movement issues or things like that. And so I guess, do you need a tweener game? Do you need a game that's Zombicide EX? Zombicide Plus? Because that's really what this is. This is Zombicide Plus. You know? Marvel United, Zombicide, Zombicide Plus, Bloodborne, The Others, you know, in terms of complexity. And do you need something in the middle? Is something in the middle going to hit? Or if you want to play something lighter, you're going to play Marvel United. If you want to play something heavier, you're going to play one of the other ones. Because if not, I mean, this is sort of an in-between. I can't tell you that if you have other Zombicides that this is going to take the place of them. It's not that different. It's not. If you have one, or forbid, you have 2 other Zombicides, you have more than enough Zombicide. I don't think this is doing anything different unless the Marvel IP is really yelling to you. except for maybe the Galactic expansion or whatever else they're hiding in the other expansions. Which again, hopefully they're hiding something in terms of mechanisms like they were with Marvel United. That's the only thing that I can hope for as well in terms of hopeful with the expansions, because Marvel United, the Marvel United base game is not where things shown. The base game was rather lackluster at retail. Where Marvel United shines and still shines to this day is with the stretch goal box with all of the villains in there that are masterfully tweaked and wonderful and different, as well as 2 of the expansions like the Return of the Sinister Six or the Infinity Gauntlet expansion, as I'm sure the Apocalypse expansion will be with Marvel United X-Men. But some of those other expansions, like the Guardians of the Galaxy expansion, the Spider-Man adventure from Marvel United, they weren't very good. They didn't offer, that different of thing, one little token, one little thing. And that's what worries me also with hearing that token language in the token language in the rule book, is that's what more expansions are going to be like, rather than the Infinity Gauntlet, the Apocalypse, or the Sinister Six expansion, where are really ratcheting things up in a different way while still using the same mechanisms in a very unique, very creative way. And that's what I want to see more of, but I just don't know if that's going to happen. So that's why I would say, if you are on the fence at all, you do not, because as far as I can tell, I cannot see anything on there that says you cannot get this pledge through the pledge manager. You back for $1, $1, or you do the lowest pledge level. That is always my recommendation if you're on the fence. You can always upgrade. You can almost always upgrade, and I have not had a CMON campaign manager that I cannot upgrade to in the past. But I've been burned several times in campaigns where I pledged too much, and then during the campaign manager, I actually found out that I didn't want as much, or I got an expansion that I wasn't interested in. You can't get that money back. So my recommendation is, unless you are 100% at that or one of those 2 higher levels, then you pledge at one of the lower levels and you upgrade later. Also, it helps split the funds that way. So in case you really want that 410, pledge 200 now and pledge 200 in 6 months when the pledge manager closes. It's another alternative. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was insightful. If you like this, if you want to see more of this, please subscribe. I do this all the time. I will also be putting out an update video closer to the end of the campaign, running through what has changed now versus then, so we can talk about what does that value look like then, what do the expansions look like, what are they adding, and what would be my recommendations at that point. So that's everything. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. I'll see you around. Ba-doom. Man, a lot more enticing than I thought. I hate to say. The Galactus. I was reading that update tonight, and I went, and not in a zombie way. Man, this is actually adding something, and I was hoping it wasn't adding something. X-Men, though. Kind of wish you could just the X-Men alone, though. That would be... I'm surprised they didn't do that pledge level, but at the same time, that's... their core is zombies with this, and gotta kind of stick to the theme. So it is what it is.